Hey folks, this is Dan from the Conan Chronology here. I've started a new series on my blog that I call the Unsung Sword of Conan, and I wanted to do kind of companion videos over here because I feel like the art needs to kind of stand on its own. And I wanted to start with Savage Sword number 68. This is one of my favorite later issues of Savage Sword, and I guess by later, I mean like after the initial 60 that everybody talks about so much. And I have never heard anybody talk about Savage Sword 68, but it's actually a really, really good issue. So I wanted to spend some time highlighting it. Weirdly enough, for as much as I love this issue, I kind of don't like the cover very much. And it's really just a nitpicking thing because I believe this is supposed to be Shahela, one of the villains, but it doesn't really look like her. And this is supposed to be Varya, one of the hero damsel in distress type characters, but it doesn't really look much like her. And basically at no point in the narrative is Conan in any underground cavern like this. I mean, it's cool. Like Joe Jusko's a good artist, but it's not very representative of what's going on in the story. It's nowhere near as bad as the next issue, which is an even better issue and has an even worse cover, but I'm planning on covering this one another time. Anyway, when you open it up, you get a pretty cool frontispiece. We have Black Cloaks of Ophir, the story I want to talk about. The Lost Race, which is an adaptation of one of Robert E. Howard's absolute worst published pieces of all time. I hate this thing. And then you have your Swords and Scrolls, which is your letter page, and a Pablos Marcos portfolio. Our title page is pretty cool. You got Black Cloaks of Ophir, and then you have this chiseled Conan. Ernie Chan does the art in this issue, and I really like Ernie's art, although I do think it's kind of fair to call him a John Buscema ripoff. When I was rereading this story, I completely forgot that it was Ernie until about halfway through, and I was totally thinking that it was a John Buscema work. Weirdly enough, it is adapted from a plot by Andrew J. Offutt, who did Conan and the Sorcerer and a couple of other Conan novels, and I think, for my money, he's a pretty good Conan pastiche artist, but I'd love to know what he contributed to the story. I think Roy Thomas was adapting Conan and the Sorcerer and some other Offutt stories about this time, so it wouldn't surprise me if they were in contact, but I'd love to know exactly what he contributed here. One thing that this issue does that I always like in Conan stories is when it opens with kind of the bad guys, or, like a cold open away from Conan. And we're introduced to two characters, Shahela and Balthus, and they're both, pretty cool villains. Both kind of hold their own, and it sort of soft launches the form of King Thanos, who will become important later on. But these two are arguing. Conan enters the narrative just south of Ianthe, and I feel like John Buscema and Ernie Chan drew this version of Conan on a horse, kind of galloping forward and to the right or forward and to the left about 20 million times over the course of their times on Savage Sword. But when Conan enters the narrative, we get what I always call kind of a Rashomon, where after rescuing this woman who he'll soon meet as Shahela from a group of would-be killers, she spins a yarn to him about the recent history of the nation of Ophir, and he listens intently to Shahela as she paints herself and her all-female guard squad, the Iron Maidens, as the underdogs in this war of tyranny. And the Black Cloaks, which served at the pleasure of King Thanos, were actually this death squad that operated with impunity and cast this shadow over Ophir. And it was they who, after a political assassination, imprisoned Queen Varya in the castle dungeons. And Conan does what, Conan tends to do. He spends some time with Shahela, and then he heads to the tavern. But just a few pages later, Conan is introduced to the administrator, Balthus, who tells the same story with different embellishments. And this is why we call it a Rashomon. It's basically the same thing with just a little bit different focus on a couple of elements. To hear Balthus tell it, the Black Cloaks were actually serving at the pleasure of Varya, and it was Shahela who poisoned the throne against the Cloaks, and it's actually the Iron Maidens who helped Shahela imprison the queen. Pretty much right away, almost too soon, we see that Shahela is pretty much totally evil as she tugs on Varya's hair. And then we also see Balthus come in, so basically right away we know they're both totally evil. And it probably didn't come as a surprise to the engaged reader either, that they're both vying for power. Now, Conan is a newcomer to Ophir, and so both of them are hoping to take him on their side for their own purposes, vying for power in their own ways. Specifically, Shahela needs to kill Varya, and Balthus needs to marry her. Now, Conan, never really cares for politics, but he does have a streak of caring about justice and standing up to tyrants, so he kind of enmeshes himself in this power struggle pretty quickly. And just a few pages in, we get kind of door number 3, where we have Toiro, who is the third option for Conan, and he is part of Conan's plan to play both Varya and Shahela against each other. This is one of my favorite panels here. We have Toiro is right. We must protect ourselves and seek to topple both these bloody-handed upstarts that we have allowed to gain both power and our queen. And then Conan thinks wheels within wheels. Just a really cool kind of moody shot from Ernie Chan there. And then, of course, he jumps down and takes out this black cloak right here. When Toiro is eventually captured, Conan gets to the castle and he has to free both him and Varya, but he does get interrupted by Balthus and the cloaks, and he is ultimately dropped into a skeleton-laden dungeon with a 12-foot-tall man-eating ghoul inside, which is one of the highlights of the narrative. It's always fun to have kind of a weird, sort of Weird Tales style monster in there, especially when it's something that you can't identify immediately, like a werewolf or a vampire. In this case, it's this guy, and there's a devil who's done the deed, according to Conan, and he is surrounded by bodies and stuff like that. This is a pretty cool 2-page spread, even though if it is a little odd that Conan falls backwards through the wall here. Conan does battle with this man-eating 12-foot-tall ghoul, long enough to stun it, but he noticeably doesn't kill it. So when we next see the Cimmerian, he's donned the armor of this nigh mythical founder of the nation, and he stirs up the people of Ophir against both Shahela and Balthus. There are some fun, though kind of vague power to the people themes here. Now, freeing Toiro and then setting his sights on Queen Varya, Conan crosses paths with Shahela one last time, and he has repeatedly said throughout the issue that he really doesn't care to do combat with women when avoidable, and he always thinks of Belit and Red Sonja each time, but he is spared from this decision in the final moments when the 12-foot zombie creature that he stunned earlier returns. And honestly, I feel like there's kind of a surprising amount of pathos in this panel where the creature eats Shahela. And I don't know, it's just kind of creepy to me the way she screams, "Aye, in the name of Mitra, Cimmerian, don't let it devour me, please." And Conan doesn't let it devour her, and he thrusts his sword up through the creature, but it's a little unclear as to whether the zombie thing was able to snap her neck or break her spine, or if Conan's sword went just a little bit too far in and also killed her. Either way, Ophir is saved for the time being. Now, this was to be Roy Thomas's second to last issue on Savage Sword for over a decade, and word was out that there would be someone new in the driver's seat. In issue 60, Roy's last continuous issue from his all-time 60-issue run on the title didn't betray anything about his departure. He didn't say a thing, but issue 61 sure did. In the letter section, Swords and Scrolls, the new writer, Michael Fleischer, who would take over full-time soon, wrote something that was a special note of appreciation to Roy's contributions on Conan through the years. And honestly, it is probably the best send-off that any writer could have hoped for. It was very sweet and very kind, and from what I understand, Marvel was not exactly feeling very sweet or very kind. The feelings between Roy and Marvel were not very warm at that point. But fan reaction was mixed to Roy leaving. One letter published in issue 62 felt that Roy had been kind of stuck in a rut for a few years, and Fleischer and the editorial team took the really classy route and disagreed, and said that all of Roy's work had been excellent. But in the back of issue 63, there was a letter writer who really tore into Michael Fleischer. He said, "I'm appalled. I'm truly appalled. The story, Michael Fleischer. His only real achievement so far has been DC's Jonah Hex, but I read some SSOC number 61 with an open mind, and in my opinion, I'd like to say it's trash, I'd like to say it's garbage, but I have to be honest, it's shit. I'm sorry if the word offends anyone and will probably preclude any possible publication of this letter, but it's the word best to best describe this misogynistic, sadistic, simple-minded piece of work. That was from Dave Clark of Haddon Heights, New Jersey, and he goes on like that for 6 more paragraphs, ending with, "Thank you for listening," and Marvel just responded, "You're welcome." One more steamed letter writer wrote in, "Can't you guys think up anything original?" Readers of any of my writing from Savage Sword will know that I'm kind of inclined to agree with those writers in, and I feel like the 60s after Roy leaves, but prior to issues 68 and 69, are not so great, especially the Michael Fleischer stuff. I'm really not a fan of his run, even though as time goes on, I think Chuck Dixon's might be even worse in my own mind. But Marvel didn't publish any reactions to Black Cloaks of Ophir until issue 71, and at that time they were universally positive. Readers praised the suspense and the plot, and they praised Ernie Chan's art, and some proposed that Ernie take over from John Buscema as the regular artist full-time, which I totally wouldn't have minded, but like I said, I feel like Ernie is mostly 90% the same as John Buscema, seeing as he was a very frequent inker for Big John. Now, Roy only had one more Savage Sword story to go until he would leave the title for the next 10 years, and honestly, it would be one of his best originals, something that I'm definitely going to cover in a future post and a future episode about this. I think it's a really underappreciated issue. Most of Roy Thomas's Howard adaptations are almost universally praised, and I see a lot of people talk about the first 60 issues, but I never see basically anybody talk about anything that happens after that, and they really should, because issue 68 is a total banger, and I can't wait to talk about a few more in coming episodes. So if you've read this issue, let me know what you think. If you feel like there are any underappreciated issues of Conan the Barbarian or Savage Sword or any other corner of the Conan canon, let me know.